Horror of Dracula is the first of Hammer Film Productions' long line of monster movies. Hammer Film is a British company that deals with gothic horror and fantasy films. The story is relatively similar to Universal Pictures' Dracula, so make sure to watch that review before watching this one. The film stars Christoper Lee and Peter Cushing, and was directed by Terence Fisher. Hey guys! Sorry for the lazy intro. I'm tired of saying what the premise to Dracula is, but here's another Dracula movie review. I'm going in chronological order. But welcome back to Garage Vampire-thon, where every day for the month of October, we talk about a vampire movie. This is something I like to do every year. Last year we did Stephen King movies. The year prior to that, we did zombie movies. So make sure you catch up on those reviews as well. But this year it's vampires, and this is the first color vampire movie we talk about. This came out in 1958. It's often referred to as Dracula 58. When it was released, it just was titled Dracula. And I guess they added the horror of, just to set it apart from the Bela Lugosi movie. So first color Dracula, the movie opens, and you get red blood right off the bat, falling onto a gravestone. And that blood is very flashy red. This is the first color Dracula, and they wanted audiences to know this is the first color Dracula. And it's really playful with the color as well. You go around Dracula's castle, and there's beautiful tinted glass everywhere, so his castle is actually really colorful, but it doesn't take away from the creepiness and eeriness of the castle. So far, what I can say about all of these Dracula movies, and all of these vampire movies in general, is I like the aesthetic of Dracula's castle in each of the movies. I like Nosferatu's castle, I like the Universal Dracula set, but they each have their own identity. And the same can be said with the performances. Nosferatu, the 1922 movie, has a very iconic performance. The Bela Lugosi Dracula is very iconic, but the Christopher Lee Dracula manages to set itself apart. That's right, this movie stars Christopher Lee. Everyone's favorite Count Dooku is in this movie. Back when he was alive, may he rest in peace, but back when he was alive, you needed a villain role, you just asked Christopher Lee. Christopher Lee, come over here, come to the Universal lot for a weekend, we need a bad guy. Yeah, he's just really good at playing villains, and this is no exception. This is probably his best villain role from what I've seen. The thing is he better than Bela Lugosi? I don't even compare the two, because he's so different from Bela Lugosi in this movie. Bela Lugosi's Dracula was very charismatic, very kind of flamboyant, kind of had some gay vibes to him. But this Dracula, he's kind of just like a coke addict. He's really like antsy. He's calm and collected 1 second, but then as soon as there's an opportunity for blood, all of a sudden his eyes become bloodshot and his mouth becomes bloodied, and he's like, it's like a really big transformation that goes on, and it's all through his performance. I think that's the most interesting part about this movie. The other movies, I didn't feel like Dracula needed blood in order to survive, but this is the first Dracula movie, or the first vampire movie, where I feel like, oh, okay, this is essential to his survival. He's fucking, You know what I compare it to? I'm gonna say a horrible analogy, but you know when you really need a pee, and you're in the car and you really need a pee, and all of a sudden, it's not that bad, but you still really gotta go, you're kind of like moving around and shit, then you arrive in your house or your apartment, and you see the toilet in your peripheral vision, and all of a sudden, you gotta pee, you gotta fucking pee. That's like Dracula in this movie. He's calm and collected, but as soon as he sees a vulnerable person, he's like, oh my god. That's a horrible analogy, but I'm gonna keep that in. That's not to say that Christopher Lee in this movie is not a Chad. He's a Chad amongst Chads. He's a super Chad, a Giga Chad, one might say. There's this character of Arthur Holmwood, and he's a friend of Van Helsing, whose family is getting threatened by Dracula. This poor guy, Dracula goes full Mr. Steal Yo Bitch on this guy. He kills his sister-in-law, and once he's done with that, he starts going for his fucking wife. This guy, this poor Arthur, can't catch a break. Dracula is such a pussy pounder. Also, a nice detail, I don't know if this was intentional or not, but Christopher Lee in this movie kind of has a monobrow, and it makes his eyebrows kind of look like a bat. That's just a little detail I noticed. I don't know if other people made that connection. And I need to talk about, spoiler alert, I guess, Dracula's death scene. This is the best Dracula death scene. In Nosferatu, he kind of just does this and then disappears, slowly fades away. And in Dracula, his death wasn't all that memorable, but this is the first time, like, the Dracula death is truly gruesome. He kind of just turns into ash, and that on the surface doesn't sound too terrifying, but, like, it really is when they execute it. This is a much sleazier Dracula movie, a much sleazier vampire movie. Like I said, the blood is very exaggerated and over the top and bright red. The women who walk around Dracula's palace, they're wearing skimpy clothing. It kind of borders the line of B-movie, but I feel like it's not quite there yet. It's like an ass hair away from being a B-movie. That's not a diss on the movie by any means. I love B-movies. But it's definitely a much sleazier watch. And it makes sense because it adds to the character of Dracula, making him a lot more sexual and making him a lot more violent, kind of make him a more terrifying person. We talked a lot about Christopher Lee, but I want to talk about Peter Cushing. That's right, not only is Count Dooku in this movie, but Grand Moff Tarkin is also in this movie. Remember when Rogue One tried to de-age his face? I was watching this movie and I saw young Peter Cushing, and I kept thinking of Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One, and I'm like, oh my god.
Ventures forth in the daytime. Sunlight fatal. Repeat, fatal. Would destroy them. 2. Garlic. Vampires repelled by odor of garlic.
It feels good to see Peter Cushing alive again, not like some puppet CG version.
Most unfortunate about the security breach on Jeddah, Director Krennic. After so many setbacks and delays, and now this. We've heard word of rumors circulating through the city. Apparently, you've lost a rather talkative cargo pilot.
I really like him in this movie because he's a fucking badass. He's calm, he's composed, he knows his shit, and this is the first time I really bought Van Helsing as a badass. They did that Hugh Jackman movie, which I'm not going to review during this marathon, don't worry. But there was that Hugh Jackman movie where they try to make Van Helsing cool. But this is a very cool Van Helsing. He's calm, he's collected, he's kind of got like a suaveness to him. There was that viral video that was going around recently where Christopher Lee talks about the legacy of Peter Cushing because they were both in the same film and they were good friends from what I can understand. And Christopher Lee at the time was doing the Star Wars prequels after the passing of Peter Cushing, and he was just so happy to be part of the same family as Peter Cushing when it comes to the Star Wars franchise, that is. The one thing that truly does date this movie, though, is the music. The music is very overbearing, especially if you live in an apartment like me. Right now I live in an apartment, and I was constantly going like through my TV remote, lowering the volume, turning the volume back up, lowering the volume, because the music is just like and it comes out of nowhere. It's like usually when it's not merited. Like Van Helsing will say something like, "I believe your daughter was bitten by a vampire."
I will forever end this man's reign of terror.
So yeah, that was kind of annoying. But yeah, other than that, this is a really enjoyable Dracula movie. I think it's my favorite Dracula movie. No diss on the Universal one. I think the Universal one really gets elevated by Bela Lugosi's performance, but whenever he's off screen, you're kind of, okay, let's just go back to Bela Lugosi. But this one, I feel like is more well-rounded and more interesting. I don't know how accurate each one of the films is to the original Dracula novel, but I feel like somewhere you have to do a mashup of Nosferatu, this movie, and Dracula 31 in order to get, like, the Bram Stoker experience. Or you can just watch Francis Ford Coppola's Bram Stoker's Dracula, which I will get to, don't worry. But guys, what are your thoughts on the Hammer Dracula? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Comment below, let me know. Have you watched any Hammer movies? Do you like Hammer movies? Yeah, and I'll see you guys around for more Garage Vampire-thon.